Hello guys and welcome back all 2,200 members of this channel. Checo has signed a new deal which multiple people would accredit that to the fact that he has many lucrative sponsors by his side backing him. But it got me thinking, where do we draw the line in terms of how powerful money can be in the sport? Obviously, we know that Formula One is not cheap. Nothing in the sport is. You know, a front wing would cost you 300,000 or something in that ballpark, if I'm correct. But we might be allowing money to dictate too many things in the sport right now. We often have the phrase money is king, and money has dictated things like what tracks we get on the calendar, when we get those tracks. It even has dictated things like the type of regulations we have gotten. But is having money dictate the drivers on the grid a step too far? As I started to think about this, obviously as fans, we know that basically no driver in the sport is without large financial backing. I mean, bar maybe one or two, even without Formula One, these guys would be multi-millionaires. And there's nothing wrong with that. I am fully behind supporting your children, you know, with the resources you have. Where I have a problem is where talent is being overlooked in Formula One because of lucrative deals. I'm talking Stroll, I'm talking Mazepin, I'm talking Latifi, I'm talking Checo's new deal in terms of how much that played a role in him getting that contract instead of maybe Yuki and Daniel. I find it really interesting because on the one hand, we can all see probably the most blatant use of this when you have someone like Latifi in the sport, or you currently have someone like Lance Stroll in the sport, where we all know that his career was more or less simply subsidized by his father. But I think you only get situations like Lance Stroll when you allow things to start, when you allow it to build up slowly. And I think Formula One is really unique in this aspect compared to many other sports, in which being lucrative isn't actually associated with your talent. And this isn't a bad thing, but it is a bad thing when it allows you to get into teams and get into contracts you probably shouldn't be able to. A club may sign Cristiano Ronaldo for however many millions, and they may be looking to benefit greatly from the commercial aspect of Cristiano. But at the same time, Cristiano only has that commercial benefit because he is so good. If Cristiano Ronaldo didn't have his skills, he also probably wouldn't have had his sponsors either. Now, contrast this to Formula One, where a driver has their sponsors, and that is what gets them into the team. And instead of the commercial aspect being looked at as a secondary, in a lot of teams, it's actually looked at as the primary, and people can be overlooked if they don't have that commercial benefit. Now, we tend to see this a lot more in teams lower down on the grid with, you know, egregious examples like Latifi, like Mazepin, in which the teams are really struggling and basically require a saving grace and any money they can get to stay afloat. But what probably prompted me to make this video was the fact that a team like Red Bull, a team that is essentially the highest they've ever been in their time of being in the sport, is still taking decisions which are heavily influenced by sponsors. And again, we all know that sponsors play a role, but the fact it's being talked about so much of the reason Checo was given that contract gives me the impression that it actually played a much bigger role. And obviously I don't like this because I want Formula One to be a meritocracy in terms of the drivers getting into teams. But even outside of the actual 20 drivers on the grid, it just makes me think about all of the drivers coming up the ranks who have been pushed to the side and never got the publicity because obviously, you know, in karting or in cars, in junior cars, there isn't this publicity of drivers essentially paying their way through the ranks. But think about how many drivers didn't get to Formula One, didn't get that opportunity because someone who had a lot more cash was willing to splash crazy amounts. Think about how many Formula 2 drivers have essentially been either denied entry into the sport or had to wait a year when a pay driver who didn't win the F2 championship or didn't even come close or didn't look that promising in general was given a spot. Obviously, this isn't something where you can fix it because then the question becomes, well, where is the money going to come from, especially when you have teams that are lower down on the grid? Okay, just to interrupt for a second, I've made a Discord just to chill out, talk about race weekends, keep everyone more updated in terms of the Formula One circle and the community that we're kind of bringing together. But yeah, links in the description, join the Discord. But I definitely think it is something that people in Formula One need to acknowledge more, is the reliance on money and how it really isn't sustainable for constant talent coming into the sport. And it isn't sustainable for having the best drivers coming into the sport, because there is a very valid argument that I have thrown out in the past that the 20 drivers we have on the grid today aren't the 20 best drivers in the world. And let's say you opened up, you know, becoming a Formula One driver to, let's say, even people who are middle class, not people who are poor, people who are regular middle class. You know, I have a feeling that some of those drivers, a lot of those drivers, probably wouldn't be on the grid. Competition is high and the margins are very fine in Formula One. The Canadian Grand Prix pole position was literally split by nothing. And so when you have driver A who has 100 million more to give you than driver B, it makes it a lot more tempting for the teams. I just wish there was more support, not just only in Formula One to the teams, but throughout the whole system of karting and cars. It feels like the FIA and Formula One really only want to get involved when it has reached the top level, when this is a systematic issue. The reason we have Lance Stroll in Aston Martin isn't because Lawrence Stroll just decided to buy the team, is because systematically through their time in motorsport, they have learned that you can buy your way and money is king. Now, if throughout the time in motorsport, Lawrence Stroll has learned that, look, no matter how much money you pay, if you put a driver there that's not meant to be there, he's going to end up being cut out because shareholders don't want it and there's going to be massive pieces of backlash, then he wouldn't do it. But because it's been allowed and because the FIA doesn't even care. Anyways, this wasn't meant to be a really long video. Just tell me what you guys think about this in the comment section. Do you think that Formula One is dictated a bit too much by money?